Alright, lesson 2 in our Betting the Super Bowl video series is going to be about basic wagers. We're going to talk about spread betting, moneyline betting, and over-under betting. All three of these basic bets are going to be focusing on the same two ideas. The first one is wagering on the outcome of a game, and the second one is going to be wagering on the final score of a game. So you need to be able to pick the team that's going to win, and if you choose to, you can bet on what the final score is going to be. Is it going to be a high scoring game, or is it going to be a low scoring game? In order to understand how and why these different bets have been created, I think it's important that you understand how wagering works for the book, or the sports book, or the bookie, or whoever it is that is taking your bet. Despite what you may hear in different places, sports books want to make even bets on both sides of the wager. So if you have a certain number of people who are betting on Team A, they want to have the same number of people bet on Team B. The way it works is that the sportsbook takes 10% off of both sides of a wager. So they take 10% of the money that's bet on Team A, they take 10% of the money that's on Team B. Altogether, this will create a little bit of a take for the sportsbook, and then no matter which team wins, they get to keep all that money. Now let's change this up a little bit. Let's say that everybody is betting on Team A and nobody's betting on Team B. If Team A wins, they have to pay money out of their pocket to pay all the bettors on Team A, and they don't have any money to cover that with because nobody bet on Team B. So it's risky. And there are many situations where, everybody will bet on Team A and Team B will win. And the sportsbooks are absolutely thrilled by that because that means they just get to keep everything. They have nobody to pay out. But they don't want to invest in situations that are risky like that. They want it to be that they just take their 10% out and they take all the winners and pay them out with the losers' money. And that's the ideal situation for a book. That's why we have what is called the spread. So we're going to start with talking about spread betting. Spread betting is the most common form of betting. You see it all the time. So I want to look at the 2015 Super Bowl here for a moment. This was New England versus Seattle. New England was a spread favorite, and it was very slight. New England and Seattle were at the time considered to be pretty even teams. New England was a very good offensive team with a decent defense, and Seattle was a decent offense with a great defense. So it was kind of strength versus strength here, and the teams were fairly even. So what you have here on the right-hand side of your screen is sort of a list of different wagers here. You see New England -1 versus Seattle, or Seattle +1 versus New England. These are the same bet. It just depends on which team you're choosing. If you were to say, I think New England is going to win this game, which they did, you would be New England -1 versus Seattle. And if you were to think Seattle's going to win this game, you'd be on the Seattle +1 versus New England bet. The minus spread indicates a favorite, and a plus indicates an underdog. So, what you do here is you bet on the team you think is going to win based on the spread. So if you think New England is going to win, you bet them -1 versus Seattle because you think they're going to win by at least 1 point. Then when the final score comes up, the final score of the Super Bowl was 28-24, New England did win, you're going to add or subtract the points of what you bet on. So if you bet the New England -1, you would take 1 off of the 28, bring it down to 27-24. So New England wins that wager, you were a winner. If you had bet on Seattle +1, you would take the same final score, and you would add +1 to Seattle's point total, making it 28-25. You lost that bet, unfortunately, because Seattle still has fewer points than New England does. No matter how you look at it with a spread, you're only going to be changing 1 point total. So the -1 +1 thing doesn't mean you subtract 1 off New England and raise Seattle's. You do one or the other based on what you bet on. Also, you'll notice that no matter how this works out, the same bettors are going to win either way. If you took New England -1 or you took Seattle +1, it doesn't matter. New England bettors are still going to win. That's the same no matter how the game comes out. For those bettors who want to keep things simpler, there's what is called a money line wager. So we're going to go back in time a little bit, talk about Super Bowl 2011. In Super Bowl 2011, you still have the same minus and plus numbers, except they're significantly higher now. We're talking about Green Bay -135 versus Pittsburgh +115. Notice that there's no real spreads here, and that's because you're doing a money line wager. You're betting straight up on the final score of the game. So, regardless of which team is favored or not favored, you simply have to worry about the winner. Now, in this case, you're going to have the same situation you had with the spread betting, where a favorite is represented by a minus number, the underdog is represented by a plus number. So, in this case, the spread was that Green Bay was going to win by 3, so the numbers are fairly similar. If you take a game where the spread was a lot larger, there was a Super Bowl in which the San Francisco 49ers were huge favorites, double-digit favorites over the San Diego Chargers. The money line wager on the Chargers was plus 400, I believe. So it was a significantly larger number. This game, most of the Super Bowls in the current era are pretty close. They're 3-7 points at the most as far as spread goes, and you'll see that the numbers for the money line are fairly small. Anyways, the minus number indicates how much money you need to bet in order to win $100. $100 is generally considered to be kind of the baseline dollar amount that a gambler cares about. So the Green Bay -135 means you have to spend $135 to win $100. Now, that doesn't mean that you're throwing money away here. You're going to get back your initial $135 too, but you're betting $135. The amount of money you'd win if Green Bay had won, which I think they did, was $235 for this total ticket. So you're automatically going to add $100 to your bet if you bet on the favorite. If you bet on the underdog has a plus number. This means that if you bet $100, you win $115. And that's an addition. It's $215 for the total amount of the ticket, but it's $115 in added profit. So these numbers scale too. So if you only want to bet, $10 on Pittsburgh to win, you'd win $11.50. Right, because you're scaling the number down based on the amount of money you bet. You don't necessarily have to bet $100. It's just measured in that amount. So now we've covered both ways to bet very simply on a team winning. Well, what if you're not really sure? There's still a wager out there for you. That wager is the over-under wager, and this is probably the second most popular of all the wagers that you'll see in any sport. The idea behind the over-under is that there's a point total that's posted for every single game, and this is the number that Vegas has figured out to be the probable average number of points that are going to be scored, or perhaps it's the perception of where people think that the number of points is going to be scored. So our example will be way back in time, Super Bowl 1992. They decided, looking at these two teams, that the over-under score was going to be 49, which is a little high, but it's somewhere in the middle of what all of the spreads have been for Super Bowls. Obviously, this was back in 1992. It wasn't as pass-happy of a league as it is in today's terms. So you'll generally see lower scores as you go back in time. Our modern scores are usually in the 50s. 49 would be a pretty good number for us today. What you're doing here, though, is you're deciding, well, is the final score going to be over 49, or is it going to be under 49? So they play the game, and the final score turns out to be 37 to 24, Washington wins. That's 61 total points are scored. So people who bet on the over are winners. And that's just it. It's a very simple wager. It's just over or under. And if it's even, if it comes out to be exactly 49 points, it's what's called a push, which is a tie. With that said, those are the three basic wagers. You can wager on these on any given sporting event that exists out there. Baseball, regular season football games all work the same way. Now, coming up is where we get to talk about how the Super Bowl is a little bit different. We have what are called prop bets, where you get to bet on things like coin tosses and what happens at halftime and what happens to a certain running back. Then there's party bets, where, Super Bowl is not generally something that you just sit around at home and watch with your spouse. You generally go to somebody's house and you have a big party, or you go to a bar, or maybe you have something within your office. I'm going to cover all of those. Pool bets, number charts, things like that. And then our final video is going to be about betting strategy. So that's what you get to look forward to in future lessons.